As we're planting these really shallow rooted crops, we need instant soluble nutrition at the root level. And it's really, really important that that soluble nutrition, and especially nitrogen, is not being robbed by the soil biology. And what I'm talking about is what's referred to as nitrogen immobilization. See, what happens is if the organic matter which is applied to your soil doesn't have a soluble nature and it's not readily plant available, the biology spends a lot of time working over those insoluble lignates. And as the biology requires nitrogen in the system, just like the biology in our systems require nitrogen and amino acids, they've got a really complex diet. And what happens is, if you can complex that diet to match what the biological requirement is, they will instantly respond with amino acid nitrogens and ammoniacal nitrogens and nitrate nitrogens in just those portions that the crop is desiring. The agronomy world, we're still trying to figure out exactly what the nitrogen cycle means. We were all taught one thing in school 20 years ago, but it seems like there is, if you can really focus on biology, the biology will tend to regulate the nitrogen itself. That's exactly what we set out in doing when we designed the perfect blend. It's from high calcium layer chicken manure. And we know that layer chicken manure is the best manure because it's got a calcium rating between 7 and 12%. The calcium comes from oyster shell. Now that oyster shell is ground up incredibly fine along with the other materials inside the fertilizer. So what happens is you have what farmer Bob Wilt in Oregon would refer to as bioavailable calcium. We have many, many growers that we pull soil tests for where the grower might have a calcium to magnesium ratio which is 1-to-1 or 2-to-1. Yet the same grower is applying year after year 1, 2, 3 tons of gypsum, a ton of limestone, but they still have a problem with calcium availability. We're not seeing it in the tissue of the plant. We're not seeing it in the sap analysis. What happens with the introduction of Perfect Blend is there's actually an increase in that calcium availability. We see it at the soil test level. Correlating with that calcium increase, we have an increase in phosphates. And it's the same time we're seeing that the humus in the soil is going up 100-fold and 200-fold and 300-fold by year 3. International Ag Labs is one lab we use to really look at what's going on at the soil level. Gives us some real-time soil data. We also use Apical Labs in Oregon. They're an amazing lab that looks at the real test for sap analysis. They will test the old leaves in the plant, and then they'll test the new leaves. And what they can do is they can actually determine what's going on in the phloem and the xylem of that plant on a real-time basis. And so it's been really neat to have these tools alongside of the technology that's been developed with Perfect Blend. This is a patented fertilizer. It's a high-value material, which is really dry, it's easy to ship, and it's pathogen-free, and it's weed seed-free. It is not another manure pellet. And that's really essential to understand because a manure pellet is essentially raw manure upon wetting. And the problem with raw manure is it takes the soil a while to break down that raw manure to make it available chemistry for the plant. So one concept is to use Perfect Blend Organics in conjunction with a manure. Perfect Blend is not a compost either. Perfect Blend encapsulates all that energy through the kinetic processor, which we have patented at the facility. And what that kinetic processor is doing is it's capturing the carbonates, it's capturing the sugars, all that good, soluble, digestible nutrition that healthy soil biology require. These bugs need really, really well broken down material, and that's essentially what we're doing when we top dress the Perfect Blend. It's simply just coming along at an application rate which is anywhere from 300 pounds to 500 pounds as a side dress where you're putting it right up against the roots. If you're broadcasting applying it, you know you're going to want to put it at a heavier application, maybe 1,500 pounds to 2,000 pounds per acre on a broadcast. Well, I'm here at Blue Fox Farm with my friend Chris Jagger. We're really excited to tell you guys about what Perfect Blend has been doing on Chris's farm. We came out here about 6-7 years ago, and Chris and I met and we talked about implementing Perfect Blend into his compost and some of the other things he was doing. What we have here is a farm where we're using very little inputs other than for the healthy soil aspect of things. So I wanted Chris to be able to tell you folks what exactly it is he's doing, how it's affecting the bricks of his produce, how his customers are happy. And so Chris, tell us about it. I mean, your program here is all organic.
Yep, we're certified organic.
Your program for the last 8 or 10 years, you've been organic?
This year is the 15th year.
15th year. And the Perfect Blend 442 is the majority of the fertilizer you use?
Yep.
Okay. And you also will use liquid fish, maybe?
Yep.
Okay. You'll use some other materials you talked about. What were those?
Yeah, really what we look at is just remineralizing our soils, things that are lost. So there's some trace minerals that we use, glacial rock dust at times, limestone, gypsum, just to help balance pH in the soil, depending on what it's doing. But really it comes down to a pre-plant distribution of the Perfect Blend, and then that usually takes us through most of the vegetative stage of any of our crops. And then once we start getting into flowering stage of like fruit bearing crops, like tomatoes, peppers, any of that kind of stuff, then we shift into using the fish to supply the phosphorus that we need to add into it. So but it's really a simple system, and it's become more and more simple over the years as well.
That's the thing that interests me the most. I mean, we are friendly peers and competitors. You know, we're always trying to figure out how to coexist with each other.
Right.
And the more is better approach that our grandfathers used to farm with 10, 20 ton of manure, and then the expense that would come with that, with the weed seeds, or in the case of compost, you know, the compaction as you're putting these materials down, and the nitrogen immobilization and some of these things.
Right.
Do you find that at first with Perfect Blend, you might go on as a virgin non-user? Do you think you'd go on with a heavier application rate of the 442, you know, granulated dry material, and then later, you know, coming in with a lesser application as things become more sustainable? I mean, what have you seen on your farm?
Yeah, so when we first started using Perfect Blend, we were definitely laying down the same amount that we had always laid down with other pelleted fertilizers. And so that was about a ton per acre. And that really just came down to the fact that that's what we were used to doing. But luckily, right around the time when I started using Perfect Blend was when I really started getting keen on doing soil testing. And not just standard tests, but I also did paste analysis as well, which shows what the plant sees in solution. And once we started doing that, then a lot started coming more clear each season. And so we started saying, well, we've got enough of these nutrients in the soil that are carrying over from the prior season. Why is this? Well, according to the test, we don't need to lay down more. So let's try it. And so you have to take that like leap of faith to say, well, I'm going to give this a try and see if I can get the same yields. And we started getting the same yields. So now we're at a point where, you know, we're 6-7 years into using the product that we're laying down only 500 to 750 pounds an acre. That's a massive savings, you know, on what we're laying in the field. And we're still seeing the same results as far as yields go. And the biggest change for me has been reduced pest resistant or pest pest pressure.
Yeah.
And that's really, I think, because of the like lesser nitrogen applications that we're putting down.
Proteolysis, maybe. Yeah. And
so,
that whole proteolysis thing is fascinating. You know, we get calls from growers a lot who want a 7, 8, a 10, a 12% nitrogen fertilizer. And invariably, we end up moving more of this 442. And so we feel there's something going on where the amino acid nitrogen that comes from the Perfect Blend, and we've talked about the process earlier, is making that biology healthy quickly. And what we think is happening is if you get 80 pounds per ton of that 442, that there might be another 25% of nitrogen that is somehow being created in the soil. Do you think that's what's happening?
I mean, I think that's some of it. I think it's also comes down to your management practices as well. So we're not just producing on ground year after year after year. We're going through rotational cycles. We're putting cover crops in, and so there's nitrogen that's there available in the soil if we can get to it. And so I think that's what the Perfect Blend is really doing. Often it's acting as a catalyst. So not only is it a fertilizer, but it's also a catalyst to the biology that we have in the soil. And for us being in an organic farm, we have to focus on biology. Even though all of us should be just focusing on biology, really, at the end of the day, because they're doing the hard work for us. So I shifted my mindset from feeding the plants to now I feed the soil, and then the soil basically feeds my plants. And that really simplifies things, because that means that I'm working in unison with that biology that's in the soil. So.
It sounds really cliche. I mean,
It does, yeah.
We hear this a lot, and coming from a conventional farming background, I was really, really, really suspect. I mean, we spread urea on my dad's farm. We use, some synthetic fertilizers and lots of sprays.
Right.
And what I would see on our farm, God bless you, Dad, but what I would see is you couldn't get a soil probe in the ground. It'd be like the hard pan where we park the car.
Right.
And we're talking right up to the root zone.
Yep.
And as a kid, I spread urea prills on a tractor, and I had a urea prill land in my lap. And I tasted that urea prill as a kind of an ignorant, 12-year-old on a tractor would do.
Yeah.
And I urinated for the rest of the day. I literally drank 2 gallons of water to keep up with the urine my body was producing.
Wow.
And so I personally look back on that experience and I think to myself, what is the soil biology going through?
Right.
If the biology in my gut was rejecting that urea, is more nitrogen better for the soil?
Right.
And I really believe that creating that organic sustainable nitrogen in the soil, and we're still trying to understand these mechanisms. I think even the universities are trying to figure this out.
Pyganic is the one thing that we'll use, and honestly that's for cucumber beetles, because they're so prevalent nowadays and they're so robust as far as, so we'll use it like when we're planting cucurbits out in the field. They'll just come in and want to annihilate it, and often we can exclude it using row cover, but sometimes they're coming up out of the soil that we just have to knock them back. But other than that, there's nothing else that we've had to use. And we've seen I don't have the aphid pressure that I used to have, and I really I attribute that to less nitrogen, because it's not like the plants are in a candy store anymore. It's like they have to work to make, to earn their keep, and so that's really, I've just seen a massive reduction in the amount of aphid pressure that I get in all of my brassica crops, which is, it's incredible, because then we don't have, how do you deal with that? Like if you have aphids through broccoli heads or cauliflower heads, there's nothing you can do about it. It's a lost crop.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at broccoli that went all the way through the winter. It's planted in August, and even though this is the end of the crop, obviously it's going to go to seed, right? This broccoli is, and my cameraman didn't appreciate it, but this broccoli is really high bricks. I mean, we're talking sugars in this stuff, and this is what his customers want. Our bodies, we know we need minerals. We know we need to get those minerals that are in the soil, and a lot of those minerals in the soil are there, they're just not available.
Right.
And so one of the things we're doing with the Perfect Blend, this patented process that I talked at length to earlier, is somehow the biology is really making those minerals get into the plant.
Right.
And we see it.
I mean, I think it's just through the natural fermentation processes that happen in the soil.
Yeah.
I mean, everything that we're working with nowadays that is good for production seems to have some sort of fermentation process around it, whether it's a natural fermentation process or a fermentation process that we're introducing to the soil through some of these fertility inputs.
Right.
It's all about processing and making those nutrients available, those minerals available to not only the microbes, but then eventually us, the eater, you know? And so we're able to then process that food more effectively, you know? And so I think that I have people come to the farmer's market and say, I don't know what it is about your carrots, but when I eat them, I just feel better. And people don't want to say that because it seems kind of like esoteric and out there, but these are people of all walks of life. It's not just one demographic or another. It's
Right.
people coming up and saying there's something to this. And I'm not trying to say, well, I'm the magical person here that's figuring this all out. I'm just growing it the way that nature intended it, So
Which is why I'm so excited about the organic food movement. There's a lot of people that thought this was a passing fad. And here we are 15, 20 years later,
Yep.
and we're growing more and more organics every year in this country. We as Perfect Blend Organics, and even Chris, what he does with his farm, we're especially interested in the vegetable markets and this new growing market, which is the hemp business. And I'm really excited about hemp. I haven't heard a negative thing about hemp yet. Long term, we know that the CBD market is for the oil and the isolates. Chris is a part of a really exciting thing where they're actually focused on the food value of this crop. Tell us a little bit about what those guys are doing.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I've been growing the last 3 years. I've been growing our hemp crop for a juice company based out of California, and they're cold pressing the hemp plant into a juice and then mixing it with a lot of other inputs as well to turn it into these elixir shots. And the whole idea there is that we're not just focusing on one isolated compound, which is CBD right now is like the hot compound on the market, which it has its place, but we're looking at the full spectrum, whole plant juice, and it's no different than wheatgrass or kale or parsley or any of these other things that people are juicing, but it has so many health benefits to it. It's incredible. So it allows us to differentiate in the marketplace, and then at the same time get these nutrient dense foods out to people. It's amazing.
Exciting stuff. I mean, we've got the potential CBD oil market for medicine, which we feel needs to be organic. I mean, if you're going to have plastic residues, if you're going to have spray residues, if you're going to have some of the other toxins in that oil, you're not going to be selling an FDA-approved medicine.
Right.
And so Perfect Blend Organics is uniquely situated to take advantage and help growers and the buyers of these hemp bioproducts. They call them, what do they call it? Biomass.
Right.
And those guys are now going to be able to go to the laboratories and say, okay, look, we've grown this Perfect Blend, grown hemp in a clean system with pathogen-free fertilizer. There's no weed seeds, there's no contaminants, so that we can guarantee our processors that, hey, we're going to have high CBD oil, grown hemp, and it's going to be free of pathogens and free of other contaminants, so that they can help establish a real market for these products.
Yep.
So that the growers of these products, a lot of Chris's friends and customers as well, can say, well, we really know what this stuff is worth.
Yep.
It's been very difficult to determine a value for these crops because of the fact that it's all over the market. You've got 3% CBDs and 6% and 8%, and some guys can grow it as high as 30 to 40%.
Sure.
So what we'd like to do is create a template for the grower to know that not just in the case of his broccoli or his snap pea that we just had, that it's real high bricks, the highest sugars you can grow, but we're going to see the same thing as this hemp market starts to unfold.
Yep.
In that CBD space.
We've always known that the hemp plant was very diverse, like that it had a lot of uses, and then when it went into prohibition and people weren't allowed to use it anymore, then we lost a lot of that knowledge. And so now we're seeing all these different uses for it, and one of them that's coming up that probably didn't exist back in the day is bioplastics, because we just didn't understand how to work with plastics at that point in time. So now there's a lot, like the juice company that I'm working with, they're looking to be into bioplastic bottles soon. And so that means that not only are you juicing the plant to feed people's bodies, but you're also making the bottles out of the plant, which then means that it's not filling landfills and all of the other
ending up in the ocean and everything else.
Yeah, it's breaking down and going back into the earth. And so it's such a diverse plant that it allows farmers to have a diversity of crops like what we have here, which is important, to have a diversity of crops. But then you have this like other crop that comes in and has another wide myriad of uses, from basically the root to the top of the plant. All of it can be used in some way. It's amazing.
We're very, very glad you took some time to meet with us today, Chris. I know you got a busy schedule, so we'll get you guys out of here. And anything else before we finish up?
No, I mean, it just really, at the end of the day, I've been farming for 22 years now. I started with a mindset of like organic was the future, and I was very idealistic about it, you know. And as time has gone on, I've realized that it's just farming is the future, you know. And so I don't polarize myself from conventional and organic anymore. But the key thing that I think that all of us as farmers in the farming community need to do is we need to just recognize that the biology in the soil is the driving force of everything.
Yeah.
Whether you are using conventional or organic inputs, the biology is everything, and we have to like stop saying that that's an organic only idea, because it's not. There's so much for me to learn from the conventional world, and there's so much for the conventional world to learn from the organic world.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, it's biology. Biology is that one driving force.
At Perfect Blend, we've always known that it's better to really feed the biology a focused nutrient source that's been designed to feed biology. And if the biology are healthy, it always comes back to the plant.
Yep.
We don't want to create a competition between the biology and the plant.
Right.
And a lot of the other fertilizers are doing that because there's too much carbon,
Yep.
not enough nitrogen, not enough amino acids, not enough solubility.
Right.
The calcium to magnesium may be out of whack. The phos to potassium may be out of whack. So as long as we're going on with a really balanced system, we know the system will regulate itself.
Yep. Absolutely.
So Chris, thanks again.
Yeah, thanks,
and
man.
Get back to work, would you?
Thanks. Yeah, I will.
Thanks you guys for joining us. We'll catch you in the next episode.